After just a couple of weeks of the NFL season, there have been a few NFL superstars who have been pretty disappointing. We asked you fans in our Voice of the Fan segment, which of these 5 NFL stars has been the most disappointing? And Kevin, we've got our results to reveal today after a few thousand of you voted. We're starting with Mario Williams, who had just 8% of the votes.
Yeah, I think Mario Williams was absent in that first game. We saw a little bit more from him in week 2, and that defensive line played much better. I think Bills fans are certainly still concerned until they start seeing the sack numbers go up. But he's there, he's going to get double teamed. I think right now, because they won in week 2, people are a little less worried.
Also, because he's the only defensive player we have on the list, possibly. Our 4th most disappointing player, Darren McFadden, with 11% of the votes after just 54 rush yards in a couple of games.
Yeah, we'll see a trend in this, Mark. I think a lot of these are fantasy owners putting in their votes because Darren McFadden expected to be a fantasy star. One thing about McFadden, he played the Dolphins' run defense very good. The Chargers' front seven's been playing very well this season. So maybe it's just taking some time. He's also clearly the best player on that team. They're relying a lot on him.
He's one of the best players on this list, arguably, along with our next candidate here, Drew Brees, who comes in at 3rd with 12%. And I think if we're talking about the most disappointing teams, New Orleans Saints are definitely on the list.
Oh, they have to be. I mean, no one expected 0-2. I think people expected growing pains without Sean Payton, with the suspension, everything they went through. But with a guy like Drew Brees, he was the reason they'd be okay. And those 4 interceptions so far, the 0-2 record, just not looking at what we expected from Drew Brees.
71.6 quarterback rating, not the worst in the league, not by a long shot, but it's Drew Brees. Number 2 on the list, Jay Cutler comes in with 13% of the vote, just over Drew Brees. 3 touchdowns, 5 interceptions in his first 2 weeks.
Yeah, obviously I think a lot of these votes came from Bears fans who watched that Thursday night debacle in Green Bay because he looked fine. I mean, the Bears offense looked great in that first week against the Colts and then really got smacked back to reality against Green Bay. We'll get a much better sense of how things go when they play the Rams in week 3.
And obviously that leaves Chris Johnson as the fans' vote for the most disappointing player after 2 weeks. And I don't know if you're keeping track here, Kevin, but there are a lot of percentage points left too. 56% of you fans said that Chris Johnson had the most disappointing 2 weeks.
Yeah, and again, I think a lot of fantasy owners voting there as well. You know, we've talked about Chris Johnson before. I know our colleague Nolan Naraki's talked about that Titans offensive line not giving him any help. They've played a couple of good defenses as well to start their season, but Chris Johnson just has not come anywhere close to what we saw a couple of years ago, and they're not giving him a lot of help. And I think a lot of people are just very upset with the fact that even though he's talked about how he will come back, he will return to form, he hasn't gotten it.
Well, week 3 is already underway. The Carolina Panthers had a disappointing loss to the New York Giants on Thursday night, which means we got a few more players to add to the list probably after week 3. But we'll have a brand new Voice of the Fan segment next week at ProFootballWeekly.com.